here we go.
Welcome to the 9 Route Fantasy Football Podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back into the 9 Route Fantasy Football Podcast. Pat and Scott are here in the afterglow of Week 1 in the NFL. We have one more game to play. We have Seattle-Denver coming up in just a little bit as we record this, but most of the heavy lifting's been done. Thursday night, we had a heck of a game. Rams-Buffalo. Buffalo really kind of took them to task, and the slate yesterday was amazing. Again, you really got to see a lot of your picks, your prognosticating, all come down to 1 week, and now everybody is, manning the bridges for all the calls you didn't make and guys you circled your wagons around. But hopefully everybody out there did pretty well. I myself had a little trouble of my 8 leagues. Looks like I'm going to go 1-7, but it's week 1. And again, things happen for a reason. So we'll see what happens on that level. Pat, I know you're in a few yourself. How'd you make out yesterday?
I think I'm going to basically go 500. I mean, assuming Cortland Sutton has a halfway decent game tonight, I should go 500. I think I have him in almost every league. So just hoping that he has a decent game and gets me up to about 500. I know in some of your leagues, we were talking before the podcast here that, some of your teams that you lost this week were a little, some of those teams you're kind of rebuilding whatever. So
yeah, the one dynasty.
It's not a true 1-7. You're kind of, I probably like 1-4. Yeah, I was gonna say out of the ones that actually, you're trying to win. Like in our league of record, you didn't have a pick until the 9th round. You're not really expected to compete in that league. So
nope.
You got some pieces though. So if you want to try to build from there, you probably can. But I think go ahead.
No, I was going to say, yep, these guys are available. If anybody's listening, just send offers first and seconds only. And one of the dynasty leagues, I just went full tank from the jump. But no, I know what you mean. But it's still disheartening, to wake up in the morning and think, man, I suck that bad. But hey, again, it's week 1. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and it's just like week 1 in the NFL as far as, some of these teams that we may have thought were going to dominate their matchups that ended up, not necessarily doing so. I mean, I think the Bengals were a pretty big favorite against the Steelers. They end up losing in overtime. 49ers were a real big favorite against the Bears and end up losing. Now that game had a little bit of an impact from the weather, but it was still, both teams have to play in it, and both teams had good rushing quarterbacks. And, I still expected the 49ers defense to show up, and, that just didn't happen. A couple other good games that Colts and Texans came down and we got our first tie of the regular season in week 1. So I'm sure Colts fans are probably not happy about that. Texans fans may be a little bit more happy, but a lot of really good games and some surprises. The Giants get a win over Tennessee, which I thought was a little bit surprising. So what we're going to do today, hopefully here, is get into some of these things that we saw in week 1, some of the things that we learned, and hopefully put some of those observations to use and make some changes to our fantasy rosters. We're going to do our week 2 waiver wire pickups, and we're going to do our start sits for week 2 as well. But before we do that, we want to announce the winner of our signed Darius Slay jersey giveaway. The winner of that contest was Odine Horn of Powder Springs, Georgia. So we got that. Yeah, that's a real clap. That's not even a sound effect.
Hey, we try hard here at the 9 Round, folks. Let me tell you, it's real. This isn't fake. This is real.
But yes, congratulations, and that jersey is in the mail. So hopefully you should be receiving it soon. Hopefully before this episode comes out, you would have received that jersey. So congratulations once again. And again, for our future contest, folks, make sure that you're following us on social media. We are at the 9 Route 1 and at Scott from Delco. And if you have any questions or tips or anything you want to hear us talk about on the podcast, please feel free to email us at the 9routeFFB@gmail.com. And I actually had somebody tell me, is it 9 spelled out, or is it the number 9? Everything that we have is the number 9. So the 9routeFFB@gmail.com, our website, www.the9routeFFB. It's all the number 9. So when you're going online to look for us, or if you're looking for our podcast, whether it be on, Apple Podcasts or, iHeartRadio, wherever you're listening to your podcast, put in the number 9 and then route, and that should pop up. So we got anything else? You would just jump right into the news.
Well, I mean, no, congratulations, Odine. I mean, we're glad to get that out. And again, that just shows people, if you're listen, subscribe, get involved in our contest. We're having a lot of fun doing this. This is year 2. So again, more jerseys, prizes coming out for those that might be interested. And again, we hope that our biggest thing is we hope you enjoyed listening, and we hope that we can help you, maybe just make that one gut call or give you a little bit of a, agreement in something that you thought on your own, or make you learn something new. Again, we're doing this ourselves. We're having a good time, but at the end of the day, we just really want everybody out there to really enjoy it. We have a lot of fun doing it. So yeah, no, let's definitely jump in.
Time for the news.
The injury news. Wouldn't be a week of football without injuries. No one's ever fully healthy. We know that is a fact when you listen to some of the veterans when they talk. Even if they're healthy and available, they're never going to be 100%. Nobody is. Everybody is day to day, literally.
Everybody's banged up at some.
Yeah. Some of us, self-induced, and some, not so much. But probably the biggest news to come out of yesterday on the injury front, if you were watching Sunday Night Football, was Dak Prescott, a fractured thumb. It was kind of like a freak injury. It wasn't anything crazy, just forward motion of a throw. Got involved with a defender coming at him, and it's looking like a 6 to 8 week timetable for Dak Prescott.
I just heard that he did have surgery today. It was successful, and the 6 to 8 week timetable is what they're looking at as far as a return for Prescott. So that's been confirmed by the surgeon that did the surgery for his thumb.
Yeah. He actually did better, considering the game that he had. He did better than Aaron Rodgers in our league of record, if that says anything for you.
Well, the injury did happen very late. I think he came out, less than half or more than halfway through the fourth quarter. So he got to play most of the game. I mean, you wouldn't have been able to tell by the score anyway, because the Bucs just completely owned the Cowboys in that.
That was brutal. So, I almost felt like I should feel bad for Dallas, but yeah, no.
To get beat that bad and lose your starting quarterback, that is not the way you want to start the season if you're any team. Speaking of not starting the season well, Elijah Mitchell also injured. He played about a quarter and then came out of the game. He was actually doing pretty well. I believe he was 6 for 41 on the ground. Not doing too bad. And then turns out he sprained his MCL. Also looks like about a 6 to 8 week return for him. Those MCLs they're tough, because even after, it's like it's just like any other sprained, muscle, joint, tendon, any of that stuff. The risk of re-injuring those things after you come back is a little bit higher as well. So Mitchell's a guy that performed well last year, but did miss a few games here and there due to injury. Looks like he's going to be out for about half of the season to start this one. So I'm not really sure if you have him on your roster. Hopefully you have an IR spot you can throw him in. If not, with the way San Francisco works, he may come back and not have a job anymore if somebody else is playing well behind him. We're going to get into some guys to pick up from that, from the 49ers in our waiver wire pickups. But tough break for Mitchell, because he looked really good last year and looked pretty good to start this game against the Bears, even though like I said, the weather was pretty crappy down there.
Yeah, Trey Sermon was let go. Eagles actually picked him up right after that. Tyrion Davis-Price and all those guys, like you said, we'll talk about, but it is a tough blow. You hate to see that happen, and maybe the weather had a factor. Speaking of another injury that doesn't maybe seem as serious, X-rays were negative, but Mac Jones, I think it was more of back spasms, but he was having some issues. Obviously, Brian Hoyer and rookie Bailey Zapp were ready, willing, and able to help out down there, or up there, I should say, in New England, depending on where you
help them lose.
Yeah. Well, and again, that team itself does look like they might actually be in the death throes of, the dynasty that they had been. Again, Brady long gone, the coach is there, but it's a weird thing with the offensive coordinator stuff and everything else. But seeing Mac Jones again struggled, and Miami's hungry. They had been getting beat up for years by that team, so those division games are definitely going to be tough. But I think Mac Jones is a decent quarterback, but at the same time, with what they've given him as weapons, they got Devontae Parker. That's great. But again, for 213, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, fairly pedestrian, lost a fumble. And again, if your back's hurting from trying to carry your team and you can't do it, it's not your fault. Things happen, but it definitely stinks to see again another week 1, especially with the quarterback. That's the top position in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. T. Higgins also injured this week, came out of that game against the Pittsburgh Steelers a little bit late with a concussion. If you've played fantasy football, if you've had any guys on your team with concussions, that these concussion protocols in the NFL, they're not there's no set timetable. It's not like you get a concussion and you're back in 5 days. It's a very non-linear process as far as going from being diagnosed with a concussion to being cleared and able to play again. There's guys who get through and move through that concussion protocol pretty quickly, and then some guys do it a little bit more slowly. Some guys move through it and then end up sort of backing up, and some of the symptoms seem to come back and rear their ugly heads again. So just keep listening to the news. Usually, I'm sure if you're playing fantasy football, you're paying attention, Saturday, Sunday, as far as, the injury reports and stuff like that. So just keep your eye out, see if T. Higgins is playing this week. If not, looks like Tyler Boyd may get his shot to step up and be the number 2 wide receiver option in that offense. So, if you got Tyler Boyd or if he's available on your waiver wire, that wouldn't be a terrible pickup this week as well.
No, Boyd's always been a pretty good wide receiver. Just kind of got, pushed down to the 3rd spot based on Higgins and obviously Jamar Chase. But yeah, Boyd's definitely going to be a guy. Hayden Hurst there as tight end might get a little more involvement too in the passing game. You never know. Also, Keenan Allen. He's been healthy for the last few years. If those that remember, Pat, unfortunately, I hate to pick a scab, but you were all in on Keenan Allen's first few years, and God, if he didn't get hurt almost every year for 2-3 years right off the bat, and it sucked because you saw so much potential and the ability that he had, and then he finally was able to stay healthy, and he's been one of the better top 5, 6, 7 wide receivers in the league for the last couple of years. Hamstring. That's a weird one. We got another guy behind us with the same thing. Hamstrings could be something basic, and it just gets managed over the season, and maybe he's not at top speed or again, ability. As of right now, we haven't heard back, whether or not that's something that, God forbid, would need surgery or anything like that. Hopefully not. To see him go out, obviously, as one of the key pieces of that Los Angeles Chargers offense. Everybody likes themselves some Mike Williams. DeAndre Carter, former Eagle, love you, had a heck of a game stepping up, and some people were high on him. You have some other options out there. Obviously, we'll talk about maybe 1 or 2 there, but Keenan Allen being an unknown currently with the hamstring. Hopefully everything works out. You probably hear something shake out probably by the end of the day or early tomorrow as far as what his outcome is going to be, if it's going to be just a week-to-week thing or if it's something a little more serious. So hopefully he gets back on the field real soon.
I think the initial injury reports come out on Wednesday. I think most teams don't put injury reports out or really practice, officially practice on Tuesdays. So probably Wednesday will be the first time you see him on the injury report and see what's going on with that. One other quick injury, we had Chris Godwin also with a hamstring injury. His looks a little bit more severe. They say he could be out roughly 2 to 4 weeks. I don't think this is necessarily a terrible thing. I mean, it's not good that Godwin went down again, but he was already on a pitch count from the ACL surgery that he's recovering from. So for him to have to sit now for another 2 to 4 weeks, maybe that's possibly what they should have done in the first place. And I'm not saying, I'm not blaming the coaches or anything like that for Godwin's injury, but to come back that quickly. I mean, he injured the ACL in December, and it's only September right now. So, that's a pretty quick turnaround. I know that with modern medicine, those things are happening faster now, but I think Godwin probably should have sat anyway. But again, with this new hamstring injury, he's going to be benched for on the sidelines for a few more weeks. So If you got any Chris Godwin shares on your fantasy football team, again, not a guy that you're going to be dropping. You're going to probably put him in your IR spot if you got one. Pick up, some other of the options there in Tampa. Russell Gage probably available. Julio Jones may even be available in your league. So those guys are going to see a lot more targets until Godwin gets back in a few weeks. So.
Yeah, no, I like you just said, two things made me laugh. The modern medicine, I just thought of like Civil War, God forbid, sawing everything off. But the worst part being, I think his agent was probably like, hey, Chris, you think you can go? Because, you got Gage there now, you got Julio. I think he felt pushed a little bit, maybe on a personal level, wants to get back because, he's a heck of a competitor and a great wide receiver. But yeah, it did stink to see him, try to get back in and just couldn't make it happen with that. So hopefully, yes, the recovery from his surgery on his ACL doesn't have anything to factor in, and this isn't anything that, stretches out throughout his career.
Yeah, it wasn't a re-injury of the ACL, which is good. It's just it's just a different injury, and that could have been from compensating from the ACL. It could have just been a freak injury. It could have been from him not running full speed, in training camp up until just like 2 weeks ago, and maybe his muscles were not in football shape, as they say. So who knows? But the Bucs will be moving forward without him. You'll have to move forward without him on your fantasy teams for at least for a few more weeks. All right, well, that was all the fantasy relevant injury news. Let's move into the week 2 waiver wire. Weekly waiver wire. All right, so Jeff Wilson is the top of my list. I know that Scott and I both added a few different guys to this list. We're going to talk about a little bit about both of them, but Jeff Wilson Jr. was the guy who came in for the injured Elijah Mitchell, took most of the running back work after Mitchell was hurt. Has been number 2 on the depth chart since basically the middle of training camp, and does seem like the most reasonable option to sort of take over as the number 1 running back there in San Francisco. You had mentioned Tyrion Davis-Price, who was their, I believe, 3rd round or 4th round pick this year, and he looked really good in training camp as well. So he's a guy that you might want to stash on your bench if you've got an extra bench spot. Go ahead and pick him up. I've also heard a lot of good things about an undrafted free agent that they signed, a kid by the name of Jordan Mason. I know he's already picked up in a few of our dynasty leagues. His name's been floated out there in some of the deeper fantasy circles. He's the type of running back that Shanahan likes, and he's a little bit bigger bodied, the type of body who can sort of take an NFL pounding workload, so to speak, and Shanahan does like him. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him mixed in a little bit and possibly getting some more touches later on down the road. If he looks good, he could potentially. Elijah Mitchell was an undrafted rookie as well. So, or now I think he was. He was a 6th round rookie. So draft capital does not necessarily matter to Kyle Shanahan, and it's who's playing well and who can help the team win. So I would pick up any of those guys, but in that order for me: Jeff Wilson Jr., Tyrion Davis-Price, and then Jordan Mason.
Next up, we're looking at a running back who was cut right at the end of training camp and quickly signed. I personally had Mike Davis on my team starting, figuring, okay, Kenyon Drake, you get picked up. Maybe you got to learn the playbook. Nah, it didn't quite happen that way. The Ravens love to run the football. We know that for a fact. And Lamar Jackson is the de facto RB1, all jokes aside. But for Mike Davis, 2 carries, 11 yards. He averaged 5.5 a carry. Hey, if I got points for that, that'd have been great. But now Kenyon Drake looks to right now maybe be the top guy. He's got fresher legs. He's got the Alabama pedigree. He had 11 carries. He also had a reception for 15 yards on 1 target. So, again, it wasn't like he was being utilized heavily out of the backfield. That offense is in a little bit of a flux, so to speak. Obviously, Hollywood Brown leaving left a little bit of a hole. Rashad Bateman, Dever Duvernay finally stepped up and looked to maybe be the kind of player they thought they were getting out of Texas. And we know Mark Andrews is there as well. I think that, Mike Davis, we still try to harken back to him maybe saving your season if you had McCaffrey go down a few years back in Carolina. Couldn't get done. much in Atlanta with a big free agent contract, and then slides over to Baltimore, which everybody's waiting for J.K. Dobbins, maybe Gus Edwards to come back from injuries. But it still looks like he got Wally pipped in a sense almost here where, Kenyon Drake is the DJ to me being Mike Davis. No, just kidding. No, it definitely looks like that. He's a guy, honestly, if the Eagles or a lot of teams I think we're probably interested in, but Baltimore with that run first, pounded style, he could be a guy that, again, if he's getting 11 carries in game one, he could be 15 to 20 carries a game, getting yardage and maybe making some plays out of the backfield. So maybe a solid flex pickup for you. But at the same time, he definitely looks to be the top running back in Baltimore.
Curtis Samuel is also on our waiver wire list. He ended the game against Jacksonville with 11 targets, which led the team. Went 8 for 55 and a touchdown. Washington actually quietly had a pretty decent game on offense. Started out pretty slow, but they did start to come back there and sort of make things happen as the day went on. Curtis Samuel was a big part of that, caught a lot of those really short passes the way he does. That's kind of his thing, averaged 6.9 yards per catch. So not a guy who is really an explosive, deep ball guy, but if you're playing in a PPR league or, sometimes even a half PPR league, anybody who's getting double-digit targets in a week is worth putting on your bench and seeing how it shakes out. Now, Terry McLaurin only had 4 targets this week. That could completely flip-flop next week and is likely to do so. I mean, McLaurin is still, the most talented receiver on that offense, at least I believe. This could have just been one of those boom games, but as we learned last year, you want to pick these guys up early and just stash them on your bench, see if the usage continues. And if it does, you've got yourself, a really good player for free. If it doesn't, what's the big deal? You just drop him and you pick up somebody else and you hope that, the person that you pick up becomes something. That's kind of how you should be rotating your bench at the beginning of the season is grabbing these guys who've shown that they can do something in week one and then, see if they can sustain that moving forward.
Speaking of double-digit targets, we have Donovan Peoples-Jones. He has been, quietly had a good game here or there for maybe a few minutes, but now looks like he might be the lead wide receiver in, Amari Cooper, it's his first game. I get it. Everybody's going to be higher on him, but Donovan Peoples-Jones, 6 catches, 60 yards, 11 targets. Amari Cooper finished second with 6. Again, first game, obviously, sure. Jacoby Brissett is not Deshaun Watson. He's not Baker Mayfield. He's Jacoby Brissett. He's a good quarterback, can manage games and things like that and managed to walk out of there with a win. Ironically, Baker Mayfield coming, back to face his former team and everything there kind of worked out in Cleveland's favor. A big field goal at the end won the game, but beyond that, both quarterbacks didn't kill it. Donovan Peoples-Jones is, out of Michigan. He's been in the league for a minute, so people know who he is. And again, once in a while he gets a big game and people jump on him. Could he become the de facto number one or just be a favorite of Brissett? The guy's going to be playing more than half the season. So if that's the case, I think Donovan Peoples-Jones is probably worthy of a bench spot. Again, based on certain matchups and things of that nature, he could even be worth a flex or a wide receiver 2 start if this stays to be a trend. If he's getting somewhere between 7 and 10 targets a game, it's probably a pretty good shot. Now, granted, Amari Cooper probably drew the best cornerback coverage and man-to-man shadow coverage, things like that. But to be able to produce on that level for the sake of maybe a touchdown, suddenly Donovan Peoples-Jones is in a whole different stratosphere that we're talking about now, closing in on almost the 12 points in our league of record. For the sake of a touchdown, was closer to maybe 20. So I think he's a player you might want to keep on your radar.
Yeah, and I think Cooper's going to draw the number one wide receiver. I mean, the number one cornerback every week. So if that's the case, then Peoples-Jones should continue to see, maybe not 11 targets, but somewhere in that 7-8 range per game. So I think that's pretty good. In that same game, however, Robbie Anderson Yeah, that Robbie Anderson.
Who?
Yeah, exactly. He actually led the Carolina Panthers in targets with 8. Finished 5 for 102 and a touchdown. So I'm talking at 20 fantasy points. He finished just over 21. Had a really great game. I mean, remember a couple years ago, Robbie Anderson was, I think last year, as a matter of fact, he was being drafted in like the 6th or 7th round. There was, all this. 2 years ago, I think he had 1,000 yards. I'm not looking at his stats, I'm just kind of going off the top of my head here, but I want to say he was over 1,000 yards in 2020. He seemed to have a really good connection with the quarterback at the time. And now that Baker Mayfield has come to the team and Sam Darnold is, the backup, listen, Robbie Anderson, always a decent football player. Even back when he played for the terrible Jets, he had some really good games, had some good connection with his quarterbacks back then. So he's not, he was actually, if you remember, he was contemplating retiring this year. And I think he's probably thanking his lucky stars that he didn't do that, because this is a really good game for him. And I think if this continues and he can match or at least closely match the number of targets that DJ Moore is getting, I think Robbie Anderson's a viable option as far as, a guy that you might want to pick up. And like I said, all these guys are just stashes. I mean, for the most part, you're not picking up most of these players and starting them in week 2, but you pick them up now and see if, like I said, those targets continue. And if they do, then like you said, you've got yourself something. If they don't, then you move on and try to find the next diamond in the rough. Who you're going to talk about, a big old diamond right here.
Oh,
probably rough for you to talk about too.
Yeah, it's more. I wouldn't say it's a diamond. It's more like a kidney stone, I think, with the way I might be forced to pass. Yeah, we're going to talk about Rex Burkhead. It kind of stinks a little bit, but it is what it is. I'm not going to pick anybody apart and think about anything that could or couldn't be Dameon Pierce. I'm all about Dameon Pierce, and yeah, whatever. You can laugh, but no, at the end of the day, it's tough. I mean, you're looking at a veteran running back who everybody looks to him as he's that waiver wire guy come like week 7, 8, 9, when you actually have to start cutting guys and making moves and somebody's not performing, and he's out there. He's a name, he's a face, and it's like, oh wow, he had like a 14-point week last week. I'll be the first guy to grab him, and you do, and then he drops 4 points, and then you cut him, and he drops 25 points and stuff like that. Yeah, you're laughing. You've been there.
I think we all have.
Oh, it's so bad. And that goes back to New England. I mean, same thing. But
even back to Cincinnati when he was there so many years ago.
Yes, don't ruin it. Oh, God. Yeah, he's old. He's 32 years old, but he was definitely the lead dog in that. In our league of record, let's see. He was RB 22 in our league of record. A nice little game for him. He had 5 catches for 30 yards on 8 targets. 14 carries, dominating the backfield, so to speak, at a 2.9 per carry clip. For 40 yards, Dameon Pierce finished just behind him, 11 carries, 33 yards, and did not really get too involved. 1 catch for 6 yards. So it's week 1. I'm not sweating it. Right now, Burkhead would be a nice handcuff if you have Pierce. Burkhead might continue to get the usage in an offense that is interesting. Again, a lot of people had the Colts tipped to be a pretty solid team this year with Matt Ryan and everything else. The game ended in a tie. Again, it's week 1. I'm not going to sweat it. Rex Burkhead, you should pick him up. You should probably throw him on your bench. Is he a flex start? Not just yet. Rex in the flex is probably a couple weeks away. I think Pierce, through practice and getting his first game jitters out of the way, should probably start to slide into a little bit more involvement. Yeah, Rex Burkhead is definitely worthy of a pickup, if you have an open roster spot or somebody who, after week 1, you just don't have that feeling about.
Yeah, I like it. Flex Burkhead. I think that's what we're going to call him from now on. It's a good nickname. Because that's about all he's ever going to be good for. You're never putting him in your RB2 spot. I mean,
RB1.
Yeah. Another guy from the Washington Commanders, Jahan Dotson didn't have a huge target game, but did look impressive with the few targets that he did have. At 5 targets, 3 catches for 40 yards, had 2 touchdowns. Carson Wentz definitely looks for this guy in and around the end zone, which is a good thing, especially if you're playing in a half or in a non PPR league, in a standard league. You really want to target those guys who are going to get some touchdowns, and it looks like from the preseason, from us being Philadelphia Eagles fans here, we follow all of the other teams. At least I follow all of the other teams pretty closely on social media in the NFC East, and a lot of good things coming out of camp about Dotson, and it showed in the first week. So, definitely a guy that you want to throw on your bench and see how things play out. I think Washington could be one of those teams, and Carson Wentz has always been one of those quarterbacks that spreads the ball around. So I think between McLaurin, Samuel, Dotson, and if you look, Antonio Gibson had a great game receiving as well. Wentz is a guy, and he's always been successful because he has been a guy who takes what the defense gives him. And he did that this week. And, all of these guys got a little bit of action. I think moving forward, you could see, a different guy each week sort of having that breakout week. So it may be difficult to start some of these Washington receivers, but I do suggest picking them up. It was kind of like, if you remember last year, we did a lot of waiver wire talks about the Arizona Cardinals wide receivers, and there was some AJ Green talk, and there was some Rondale Moore, would have a game, and then, it would be different guys, different weeks. I think that the Commanders could be heading in that direction this year with their wide receiver core.
Yeah, definitely looks like there's some potential there. And I know you and I had talked maybe on and off mic, not camera, not just yet. But that,
people are not ready for that.
We're getting there. Big face reveal coming up. But we are, we talked about, Carson Wentz, and I think you were a little less high on him. And I felt like, maybe he had a shot. I love the Bronco. I love Carson Wentz. I know things fell so far, so fast in Philadelphia. And to see him go, it really stunk, because I think for a lot of our fans, it thought was, this is our guy, 2017, cruising along. And then the injury. 2018 was like a weird season where it was a rush to get back, still injured. He leaves after 2020, long story short. And some things weren't maybe as kosher leaving. That being said, he goes to Indy, has a meh season, but it's his first year, and, it's a restructured team. Jonathan Taylor kills it. The ownership didn't like him and got rid of him. He moves on to Washington and had a heck of a game week 1 against Jacksonville, ironically against his former head coach from the Philadelphia Eagles, Doug Peterson, who is now in charge of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He put up his 10th highest yardage total in his career in this game. He tied his career high in touchdown passes in this game. I think overall, he's probably going to really succeed. And I think, again, Jahan Dotson being a young, hungry receiver, Terry McLaurin with a legit quarterback, Logan Thomas coming back from injury. It's going to take him a little bit he had a pretty tough injury, and he's not a kid anymore. It's going to take him a minute. Antonio Gibson, who went from a thing to not a thing. Brian Robinson, we hope you're doing well. We hope you get back soon. Is a thing again after this week. So suddenly that's a very dynamic offense. Again, Jacksonville being Jacksonville, you could say whatever you want. But for us here, we looked at our division going, 3 of the teams won, 1 team didn't, Dallas. But Washington, out of those 3 teams, probably looks to be the most aggressive and scary on offense. And offenses are led by the quarterback. I think Wentz, just like he did in our league of record, finished as our QB2. Obviously, you got a couple guys left to go tonight. But at the end of the day, I think he's definitely worth a roster spot if you have a weaker quarterback. And he will be a waiver wire pickup, I think, no matter what. In our league and in a lot of leagues. I mean, Superflex right now, if you had him as a QB2, you probably did pretty well. I think.
Yeah, congratulations.
yeah, damn right. Yeah,
congrats on your win. Yeah, Wentz is definitely a guy who, even coming into the season, I saw him as sort of a streaming option. If you waited on QB, I know there was a lot of guys. I was a real big Trey Lance guy. He looked absolutely terrible in week 1, so there may be some. We'll see how that shakes out by the end of the season. but Wentz may be a guy who Wentz may be a guy who can get you through until Lance sort of figures things out. Might be making some claims for Wentz myself in a few leagues.
There he is. Yeah.
OJ Howard, a guy, again, we don't ever really suggest picking up quarterbacks or tight ends, unless something crazy happens and a guy just has, a couple games in a row where he's got a ton of targets and just seems to be, a real integral part of an offense. We're mentioning OJ Howard because he did have 2 touchdowns on 2 targets, 2 receptions. Again, big guy, a guy that apparently Davis Mills was looking for in the red zone. And, if you can get that kind of production again, especially if you're in a standard league where, you're not getting points for receptions, touchdowns are the way to go. So if they're going to target OJ Howard in and around the end zone, he's not a bad pickup.
Well, I kind of agree. And now the only thing with that, I think he's going to get looked at a little bit more. That offense is weird. I'm not saying that you should, again, trade Mark Andrews and pick up Howard and start him at your guy. But again, Brandon Cooks is basically the wide receiver on that team. There isn't a lot of guys that fit as a second. Nico Collins had a meh game. Week 1, totally get it. But 2 catches, 38 yards. So he averaged 19 a catch. Both were touchdowns on 2 targets. Brevin Jordan's never been able to step up. Pharaoh Brown is basically a blocker. He had a catch for 17 yards. And again, that was a weird game, a little bit of back and forth. I kind of think he's going to be a sneaky play. My early is just him ending up on that team and being looked at that quickly. He's got, Pat, I think he's got top 10 potential for tight ends this year. Just something about it. I really feel it.
Yeah, well, with 2 touchdowns, he's probably already halfway there. It doesn't really take much to break the top 10. But you're right. I mean, if he is making that much of an impact that soon, then yeah, I'm sure it's a possibility that more to come is likely.
Well, when we play Houston in the Super Bowl, I just hope that OJ Howard, doesn't tear us up.
Right. All right. So another guy that we're going to recommend picking up at least for a week, maybe not even a week, but Josh Palmer from the Los Angeles Chargers. With the Keenan Allen injury timetable being unknown, Palmer's a guy that you can pick up and would be the wide receiver 2 there behind Mike Williams. Assuming that Keenan Allen doesn't play. Again, we're not sure if he's going to or not yet at this point, but Palmer's a guy who, you throw him on the end of your bench, and if Keenan Allen is out, maybe you throw him in your lineup, maybe you don't. He's not somebody that I'm like highly going after, but he's definitely a guy who, especially if he makes it through waivers and nobody claims him, he's a guy that you could stream, in a flex position or a wide receiver 2 position, depending on if you had Godwin. If you had, good Lord, God forbid, you had Godwin and Keenan Allen, and Allen doesn't play, you could very easily pick up and play Josh Palmer, and I think you would be fine with that. And then I'm going to let you talk about our last one because your cheeks are probably already red from smiling so much about this young man.
Go on.
You definitely called this one early in the season. I mean, it's only week 1, but so far you were on it.
I know. But I do appreciate it. Please go on if you like. Again, mostly I'd say the majority of fantasy football players play PPR, points per reception. And there's a young man on the Tennessee Titans, handsome guy. I'm married, no shot. But
Treylon Burks?
He's
young guy. What are you talking about?
Totally handsome, totally young, totally a rookie. Yes. Who had a nice game considering all the ups and downs. Real quick sidebar, yes. Treylon Burks doesn't know the playbook. Treylon Burks has asthma. Treylon Burks is running with the 3rd team. Treylon Burks, everybody made him out to be almost like the Jamar Chase can't catch because the football's different. And that was red flags all over the place. Wait a minute, this guy's going to be like Jerry Rice. Yeah. He had a very nice game for his first game of his career, and being a first-round pick, absolutely. Should have won the game. Randy Bullock, we're not going to go there. But Kyle Phillips out of UCLA, 6 catches.
The other rookie.
Oh, yes. Oh, they have multiple rookies. They even have a rookie tight end. They had Kyle Phillips out of UCLA. 6 catches on 9 targets, 66 yards, had a big play at the end to get them down to the point that they should have, would have, could have won the game. this kid has Cooper Kupp written all over him. I'm sorry. Like it's. I mean, they're both like blonde. I get it. Like, my gosh. Like
you heard it here first.
What's that?
You heard it here first.
Oh, I have him in I think every league that I'm in, and he's one of those guys where people are like, yeah, whatever. And then you started watching him through training camp, and they were showing him cooking cornerbacks on like those joint practices, and it was like, all right, yeah, whatever. But when you watch his moves, and it's Cooper Kupp, it's Hunter Renfrow. I know you're not a big fan. But it's also him and it's Kyle Phillips, or these little shifty guys underneath that do the, like it's Talladega Nights. It's shake and bake, boom. And you just see them pop and they come out of the slot and nobody's within like 7 yards of them. And people are looking around like, how is this guy open? He has that potential. Tannehill's a veteran quarterback who will look for open guys. He also had a little bit of a connection in the preseason with Malik Willis, who is waiting in the wings. I think he's a player. If you're in Dynasty right now, get Kyle Phillips, because I really think that he's going to be that kind of a player for down the road. I love the player. I think he is the next guy that's going to be like that again, as long as he has good quarterback play. And Treylon Burks and him will play off of each other very well, almost like Woods and Kupp kind of played off each other a little bit there in the beginning. I think you're going to see that kind of happen, and he strikes me as that player completely.
Yeah, absolutely. He definitely looked really good from what I saw. All right, so that wraps up our waiver wire segment. There's 11 guys there for you. We're not saying to pick up every single one of them. We're just giving you some suggestions of guys who, look like they were
just the
parts.
ones I talked about. Don't pick up those guys. Don't worry about that.
Only the odd guys. No, we want to give you some options if you're looking to, you should always be looking to improve your roster. Obviously, you're not picking up all of these guys because you probably don't have that many guys to drop. If you got a guy on your team that just, completely disappointed, maybe he was one of those guys that we talked about in the preseason where it was like, hey, let's see what happens week one. Let's see, what this guy's role in the offense is. And that role ended up being a lot less, than you were hoping, I guess, when you drafted him. We saw as maybe being a possibility. I think it's safe to drop some of those guys now and go out and grab, especially a guy like Jeff Wilson. Like, he's more than likely going to be the starter for at least the next couple of weeks. I think, you definitely need to get out and grab him. As far as like some of these other guys like Kenyon Drake and things like that, like we know that J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards are eventually going to come back. Mike Davis may have a bigger role. I'm not huge on Drake, but again, if he's getting 11 carries, go ahead and pick them up. And then some of these other guys, as you move down the list, put them on your bench. Like I said, see where they fall coming forward. And then, if they continue to kind of rise and be a bigger part of the offense, then you found yourself a gem. And if they don't, then, you just replace them at the end of your bench with somebody else. Let's get moved into our start sits. I don't want to run out of time because these are sort of our favorite things to talk about here, the start sits. Start sits. You know what? Let's do this. I will run through my starts, and then you run through your starts, and then I'll run through my sits, and then you run through your sits, and we'll do it that way rather than going back and forth.
You are so organized. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I try. Yeah. It's the military training, and just seeps into everything I do.
Sir, yes, sir.
Oh, Captain, my captain. All right. So my start for this week at quarterback is going to be Carson Wentz. We just talked about picking him up. I think you could pick him up and absolutely play him this week, especially, again, if you're a guy like me who drafted Trey Lance everywhere. Carson Wentz may be in my starting lineup in quite a few leagues this week coming up. We'll have to see. I have to check all the matchups and see what's what. But Wentz looked really good. And he gets Detroit this week, who gave up 38 points to Philadelphia in week one. They did make it a game and kind of made Philly keep the foot on the gas a little bit there. And I think that if, Washington can play in that same fashion and Wentz can play well and can throw a few more touchdowns this week, I think Detroit is going to, their offense is decent. I mean, they're not great, but they're good. And I think that Detroit is going to surprise people and win a few games. And it honestly wouldn't surprise me if they won this game. But I do think that it has a potential to be a pretty high-scoring game, and so I'm going to start Carson Wentz versus the Lions this week. My running back start of the week is going to be Kareem Hunt. I also picked Kareem Hunt last week, but He's one of those guys who he's the 1B, I guess, of that running back group. And so a lot of people are scared to start him. But he showed again this week that, again, looking at fantasy points per game, I said this in the preseason, he actually outscores Nick Chubb for his career as far as fantasy points per game. Kareem Hunt is just an outstanding athlete. And when he touches the ball, he just does explosive things with it. So I think against the Jets this week, the Browns with a good defense should be ahead, should be running the ball. And in the second half, it seems like that's when Hunt does most of his damage. So I could see Kareem Hunt getting 12 to 15 carries, a couple catches out of the backfield, and being very RB2 flex worthy again this week for your team. My wide receiver start is going to be Hunter Renfrow. As much as I hate saying that, they go up against the Raiders go up against the Arizona Cardinals this week. Renfrow is a guy who did surprise me with the number of targets that he got. I was surprised that, Adams had, I think, 17 or something like that, some crazy number, which after the 19 target week one that Darren Waller had last year, this is kind of what I was worried about for Hunter Renfrow as far as his season long outlook. But the first week he had a decent game. And I think against Arizona, it's going to sort of be the way the Arizona-Kansas City game was this past week, where both teams are going to score. I don't think that Las Vegas's defense is as good as Kansas City's. And I think Arizona is going to score, and Las Vegas is going to have to keep up. And I can see Renfrow getting, somewhere in the neighborhood of 7-8 targets and catching most of them the way that he does, and possibly getting into the end zone this week. So I think he's a good start, especially in your PPR leagues. Start of the week at tight end for me is going to be Evan Ingram. He didn't have a great game week one versus Washington, but he was, I think, second on the team in targets. And he's an athletic guy. I think that there's a chance, especially against Indianapolis, who last year was one of the worst teams in the league against the tight end position. They also, again, gave up 2 touchdowns to O.J. Howard, who literally just walked into the Texans locker room, I think, on game day and put his uniform on for the first time and somehow caught 2 touchdowns. So I'm not saying Ingram's going to have 2 touchdowns, but I do think that there's a possibility that, against that Colts defense that just, for whatever reason, bleeds points to the tight end, I think you could do worse than Evan Ingram this week if you were looking to stream a tight end or, play a cheap tight end option in like a DFS league or something like that. And my start of the week at the defense position is going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not really much of a surprise considering what they did to Cincinnati this past week, at least for the first 3 quarters of that game. The Steelers defense was completely dominant. With New England's situation, their offense not looking too great. Last week, the Mac Jones injury, not even knowing if he's going to be the starter. They may end up having a backup quarterback. New England doesn't have a ton of talent on offense. They have a bunch of good players, but they don't have any really great players. And I think that it's going to be difficult for them to move the ball and score against the Steelers. And if Brian Hoyer's in there or an injured Mac Jones is in there, I think the Steelers have an opportunity to really kind of tee off on those non-mobile quarterbacks and get quite a few sacks and maybe a few turnovers.
All right. Looking to start this week. I think Kirk Cousins against the Philadelphia Eagles. Not that Jared Goff had the greatest game in the world, but the Eagles defense showed that they could bleed some points. They did have a pick 6. And Goff is a bit of a mannequin, but Kirk Cousins coming off a very nice game against the Green Bay Packers. Again, not a vaunted defense, but 23 of 32, 277, 2 touchdowns, and that wide receiver of Justin Jefferson, who a lot of people have him pegged as the best in the league. A lot of people drafted him in a top 5 pick. He showed up 9 catches, $184, 2 touchdowns. Maybe they caught Green Bay sleeping. I don't know. But Kirk Cousins has been great. He's had some of his best career totals against the Eagles, both as a member of Washington and also at the Vikings. To me, I think he's really going to be a guy that could be – he's got top 5 potential. If the Eagles defense rallies their wagons, maybe not so much so. But I think he's definitely worthy of a start. He's definitely a top 10 quarterback this week. Moving on quickly to Antonio Gibson. We talked briefly, speaking of Washington, that Brian Robinson not being a factor in the backfield and J.D. McKissick playing a second role. Antonio Gibson had a terrific game. Carson Wentz seemed to get him involved. Obviously, the running is not his, but in the passing game, he definitely was involved. He had a flat 20 points in our league of record, PPR, of course. 7 catches for 72 yards, 58 on the ground. A touchdown would have propelled him into top 5 category. Next, I like Christian Kirk. I think he's going to really be what they thought he was, the wide receiver 1 against the Indianapolis Colts this week. He did have a nice game. 6 catches, $117, just missed out on a touchdown, 12 targets from Trevor Lawrence, who is going to be looking to spread the ball all over the field. His college roommate / buddy, Travis Etienne, don't know if they're roommates, was second fiddle to James Robinson, so he isn't as much involved in that offense as we thought. I think that overall, again, Christian Kirk is being paid to be that guy, so he is going to get the targets. He is the wide receiver 1. Marvin Jones, only 6 targets. Zay Jones had 9, so you combine those two, 15. Still, the lion's share goes to Kirk, and I think he's that guy. Following up with our tight end, my pick this week is Gerald Everett. I think with the Keenan Allen injury, that's going to be a pretty decent factor. I think Justin Herbert really got him involved quickly yesterday. He had some really big plays for them. Chain movers, 3 catches, 54 yards, had a touchdown, 3 catches on 4 targets. He averaged 18 yards a catch. So again, if you're getting bonuses for maybe 20 yards, 15 yards a catch, anything like that, he's a guy to keep in mind. You're looking at DeAndre Carter, Gerald Everett, Mike Williams, and Josh Palmer are going to kind of round out that wide receiver core. Obviously, Austin Eckler out of the backfield. So for a tight end, I think this week that Everett against Kansas City, that always likes to bleed points. Zach Ertz had a nice game against them, even though they smoked the Cardinals this week, is that guy. And Everett's former team, I'm going to talk about for my defense, Seattle. They have yet to play. They have to play, and they'll be on a short week, and I don't care. They have yet to play against the Denver Broncos tonight in a homecoming, in a sense, in a weird way, with Russell Wilson. But I don't like Trey Lance. Pat, I know you do. I don't think he's going to be a good quarterback. I think it's going to take a long time for him to maybe develop into anything. And I think coming out of week 1, a little shell shock in a tough weather game, I hear that. Okay, that's fine. The running back being banged up now, suddenly Lance is going to have that much more pressure on him. Does he need a haircut? Yes, he does. But at the end of the day, I think Seattle really will take it to them. And I think Seattle could win the game because of their defense if they get enough turnovers.
All right, let's move on to our sits for this week. It was hard for me to find a quarterback sit because a lot of it was just obvious. Like, you're just not starting. Like, it seemed like all the good quarterbacks played fairly bad defenses. The only one that I found that kind of, I guess from watching the game, kind of turned me off a little bit, and my sit for this week is going to be Aaron Rodgers against the Chicago Bears. Bears defense looked pretty good against San Francisco. I know that was, it was like a monsoon that they were playing in, and that probably had a little bit to do with it. But Aaron Rodgers did not look in sync with any of his wide receivers this week. They just, Christian Watson, the first play of the game, just dropped what would have been probably a 75-yard touchdown. With no Devontae Adams, the Chicago Bears have a pretty good run defense to kind of match up with A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones. Rodgers is going to have to get to the drawing board quickly with these wide receivers. Now, Allen Lazard could come back, which I think would be a little bit of a boost to Rodgers, but he's a guy who, if I had him on my team, I maybe would pick up a guy like Carson Wentz or something like that and start him over Rodgers, because I don't think that nothing looked in sync in that offense. So a guy you just mentioned is going to be my sit of the week at the running back position, Travis Etienne versus Indianapolis. Indianapolis last year was the 3rd best team against the running back position as far as fantasy points allowed. Etienne wasn't really all that involved in week 1, 4 carries and 4 targets. Not as much a part of the offense as I thought that he was going to be. Now, that may change as they move forward, but it's not a good sign, and I definitely would not feel comfortable or confident starting Etienne versus a pretty decent defense in the Indianapolis Colts this week. My sit of the week for wide receiver is going to be Amari Cooper. Again, we spoke about Donovan Peoples-Jones leading the team in targets. Cooper, again, is going to be drawing the New York Jets' best cornerback for the most part, which is Sauce Gardner, who quietly actually had a pretty decent game. A lot of the damage that was done against the defensive backs in by the Baltimore Ravens was not aimed at Gardner, and I believe Gardner is going to be on Cooper for most of that game. So I'm not really loving his outlook. Plus, I expect this to be a pretty low-scoring defensive type battle with Jacoby Brissett at the helm and the Cleveland defense being a pretty good, a solid defensive unit. So low-scoring game. Good cornerback usually doesn't work out very well for a team's number one wide receiver. I'm also going to sit Austin Hooper. Surprise, surprise. Austin Hooper actually only had one target in this game against the Giants this week. Not encouraging at all. Like you said, with the rookies, they seem to get a lot of the looks from Ryan Tannehill. Austin Hooper didn't even finish first on his team in tight end targets. So, for me, I'm not really willing to put Austin Hooper in my lineup, especially against a defense as good as the Buffalo Bills after the week that he had in week 1. And my sit of the week for my defense is going to be the Chargers. They looked pretty good against the Las Vegas Raiders on Sunday, but they get Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs this week, and we saw what Mahomes did. I think he must have heard that I had him ranked down at 8 on the season, and basically just gave me the finger and was like, "Oh yeah, no, I'm the quarterback 1, by the way. Don't you ever forget that." So through 5 touchdown passes against now Arizona's defense is not what the Chargers were, and the Chargers were really good against the pass last year. So I don't see another 5 touchdown performance from Mahomes, but there was kind of this thought process that with Tyreek Hill gone, Mahomes may even be a little bit better in the fact that he isn't really looking for just one guy. He really can see the whole field and just kind of pick the defense apart. And it sure looked like that's what he did on Sunday against the Cardinals. So I would be hard pressed to start any defense against Kansas City at this point in time.
All right. We're going to move on to my sits, and it's pretty straightforward. Tom Brady, sit down. You're not going to play this week because you're playing the New Orleans Saints. They have had, let's take a peek. 28 sacks in 9 games against you. I remember vividly ended the year with a banged up team that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers played the Saints, and they seem like they own Brady almost like the way the NFC East owns them in Super Bowls. If you get pressure on him, that makes him not as functional. When he has time, he's got that quick release. They talked about it last night, 0.3 seconds, boom, get the ball out, all that stuff. I just see him struggling. He didn't have a phenomenal game last night. That defense won that football game. We all saw that. So I think Tom Brady is definitely not worthy of a start. Carson Wentz, Kirk Cousins, our 2 starts for this week could definitely do a lot better for your team. Next, we're going to talk about my running back, David Montgomery, who is my running back on a couple of my teams. I also have his handcuff, Khalil Herbert. They're going against Green Bay this week, who got embarrassed by Minnesota. That's not the way you start a division. You go against another division opponent in Chicago this week. David Montgomery, I think he's going to have a tough time. Khalil Herbert looked like the better running back. He seems a little younger, a little fresher. Again, there was some bad weather involved in that game, and it was San Francisco, who has one of the top defenses, if not one of the best in the league. Again, it was a tough game for him, but I see now that timeshare and all that stuff starting to factor in. I think you could do better than David Montgomery. I hate to say it. I can't in some of my leagues. Drake London, you had a nice game week 1. I think it was 7 catches, 74 yards, first game. Of course, pushing Kyle Pitts out and making their owners freak out. Guess what? You're going to have to play against the Los Angeles Rams, Super Bowl champs, coming off of a really tough home game opening night against, the Buffalo Bills that just ate the quarterback alive and all that. Defensively, they did get carved up. Buffalo and Atlanta are as polar opposite as an offense as you can get. And for some reason, I think Jalen Ramsey has a little something to prove. I can't say that he may be shadowing, but I think he's going to be hungry enough and intimidate the heck out of this kid. And he has no shot this week to be a viable option. He should be on your bench this week. I'd be very surprised if he was a top 25, top 30 wide receiver in fantasy this week. Logan Thomas just made his way back from injury and had a reasonable game. Looked like he could get back to his former self. The reason I'm saying that you shouldn't get interested or itchy to start him with Carson Wentz and think that maybe he's got a shot. They're playing Detroit. Now you say, yeah, right, whatever. Just watching the game last week, Dallas Goedert did not have a great game. Again, I'm not high on him as a tight end, but their pass rush, although they didn't get to Hurts a lot, they made that offensive line that's arguably the best in the league look pedestrian a lot during that game. Jalen Hurts had to tuck and run a lot. You could say it's the quarterback. You could say whatever. But I think that Logan Thomas is going to be in there more for blocking purposes than anything else. Could he make a couple plays? Sure. Is he going to get you more than 5, maybe 6 points this week? I highly doubt it. I think he's going to be in there to block. He's going to protect that quarterback. You're going to see McKissick. You're going to see Gibson, those guys underneath. They'll run some jet sweeps with Dotson and things like that, Curtis Samuel. But Logan Thomas, I would stay away. Don't get interested just yet. Let him build his strength up, and this is a bad matchup against Detroit. Finally, my sit on defense is the Chicago Bears. You are playing your owner this week, Aaron Rodgers. He owns Chicago. We know that. He told them. And coming off of last week, getting reacclimated, a new offense, like you just said, Christian Watson dropping passes, things like that. I think that they probably get themselves back in sync. David Bakhtiari was out. That's a big thing to be missing your bodyguard on those levels. And I think right from the jump, they just jumped all over Green Bay and weren't scared. The Chicago team, a little bit different. Again, you beat San Fran, but you beat them because of a bad quarterback and bad weather. This time around, I cannot see Chicago exceeding expectations. This strikes me as an Aaron Rodgers, revenge, get myself right type of game. 333, 3 touchdowns, that type of a game. So Chicago, sorry, there's no way on God's green earth you're going to start on my team as my defense this week.
So you don't agree with my Aaron Rodgers start then, or my Aaron Rodgers sit this week, huh? You think he's going to blow the Bears up?
Yes, sir. I just can't imagine. I can't imagine back-to-back weeks of him just poo-pooing it. And I know people are like, obviously he needed Adams more than, but Alan Lazard, people were like, yeah, whatever about him. But Lazard not being on the field, Sammy Watkins new to the team. Yeah, you got Randall Cobb, Romeo Doubs, as I like to say, is actually going to be probably the best wide receiver on the team. But, it's going to take a minute. And again, Watson disappointing with that drop, just kind of pushed everything. You can see the running backs getting used, even if they game plan. Rodgers may not be a monster, but at the end of the day, I feel like he's going to be. And the running backs can make the plays, both out of the backfield, catching and running. I just can't see back-to-back weeks. Justin Fields, I think, is going to have a nice game, but at the end of the day, Green Bay's not going to drop back-to-back division games. I think that, again, Aaron is going to just tear them up. I'd be stunned if he had another bad game.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for our episode this week. Hopefully, we were able to give you some good waiver wire pickups and some good start sits. We try to, same as last year, we try to keep these start sits with some guys that, you may be on the fence with. And, even in some cases when you're talking about Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, two of the best to ever do it, maybe not necessarily guys you're on the fence with, but guys maybe that you should be thinking about sitting potentially in your league. So, hopefully we were able to give you some good information. Again, please feel free to contact us on Twitter or on our email. Again, we are at the 9route1 on Twitter and at Scott from Delco on Twitter. Our email address is the 9routeFFB@gmail.com. You can email us with any questions that you might have, anything that you want to hear on the show, and we'll try to get that on there for you as well. And if you just have a general, start sit question, or should I pick this guy up, or should I play this guy, whatever, shoot us an email or hit us up on Twitter. We were always happy to answer your questions for you. And, that's what we're here for. We want to help you win some fantasy championships. And, it doesn't start necessarily in week 1 or week 2, but you do start to build that foundation. So we do look forward to hearing from you all. Scott, do you have anything before we get out of here for the day?
Again, Pat, like you said, hey, feel free. I know at the 9route is our normal Twitter handle. At Scott from Delco, feel free. Shoot me a question. I wouldn't mind answering, getting a little involved, other than scrolling through all the political quagmires on Twitter and everything else in between. But at the end of the day, Mickey's and Tuckerton, appreciate you guys. I know you're kind of our unofficial sponsor, so to speak. And again, we do appreciate you guys have great food, great atmosphere, great drinks. The owner's the best. And we appreciate you for being on board and listening and supporting us as well. Maybe try to get you an autographed jersey there as well someday. But at the end of the day, we appreciate everybody listening, and we just love doing this. And, we look forward to talking to you again next week. with week 3. Good luck this week, everybody, and we'll see you then. Peace.